Okay, guys, we're going to start in just a sec. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of Finance and Corporate Services Committee. Because this is a different timing date, I do need a motion to waive notice of the procedural bylaw. Could I get a mover for that? Moved by Councillor Johnston. Those in favor? And that carries unanimously. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Not seeing any, we'll move on then to the consent items. Can I get a mover for the consent? Moved by Councillor O'Dooney. Any questions on the consent items? Not seeing any. Those in favor? And that carries unanimously as well. Okay, we'll move into the first discussion item. It's a sign bylaw amendment. I'm actually going to ask Councillor Arnaitis to chair this as it's in my... Oh, sorry, Councillor Singh? Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I forgot to key in time. For the Brum Yards master plan, I'm just going to declare conflict for that, as myself and my family have a property that's adjacent or close proximity.
Very good. Thank you. Councillor Arnaitis, thank you.
Okay, so we'll be dealing with sign bylaw amendment application for 1495 Victoria Street North. We have, I guess, is this a 20-minute presentation by, or 5-minute presentation by staff? Ms. McCowan, you're up. I don't know. Thank you for clicking in.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Ioannidis and members of Council. I'm here this evening to present our recommendations for a sign bylaw amendment at 1495 Victoria Street North. A sign bylaw amendment application was received to replace an existing 4-panel static billboard sign with a new double-sided digital billboard. The current regulations for billboard signs were established in 1995. At that time, Council directed staff to update the sign bylaw to introduce more restrictive regulations for billboard signs to address the proliferation of billboards throughout the city, resulting in the current regulations limiting billboard signs to industrial and employment zones. When the new rules were approved, there were 23 billboards along the Victoria Street corridor. Since then, there has been a decrease in the total number of billboard signs, where only 14 billboards currently exist in the commercial zones along Victoria Street. Non-complying signs are expected to phase out when they are no longer viable. The intent of the billboard regulations or restrictions is not to permit new billboards in commercial zones, focusing new digital billboards to employment zones, including the northern section of Victoria Street between Centennial Road and the Grand River. The regulations put in place in 1995 were effective in limiting the location of billboards while allowing for new billboards in employment zones. The general amendments to billboard regulations are not part of the decision in front of you this afternoon. The sign bylaw states that signs requiring substantial alteration shall comply with all regulations of the sign bylaw as though the sign was being newly erected. It is expected that as redevelopment occurs or as sign structures are no longer viable, the existing signs that do not conform to the sign bylaw will be removed. The amendments required include allowing the proposed sign in a commercial zone, a reduction in the minimum setbacks to property lines, distance separations to a residential zone and other billboard signs, and finally, an increase in the maximum allowable sign area. Staff are recommending refusal for several reasons. The proposed billboard does not meet our vision for low-rise commercial corridors, which aims to avoid visual clutter, including signs that do not dominate the streetscape, promote an attractive and comfortable streetscape with signs integrating into the building and landscape design, and avoiding billboard signs. While this is an arterial commercial corridor with uses geared to the traveling public, the nature of the corridor has evolved with the addition of the multi-use trail. Road users are no longer only those vehicles, and a welcoming environment for pedestrians and cyclists includes consideration for the scale and design of signage. Staff recognize that digital signs are permitted in the Victoria Street corridor. The visual competition among business signs has led to several digital ground-supported signs along with portable signs to draw attention to businesses along the corridor. Digital signs level up that competition both in its size and placement. Allowing this digital billboard can set a precedent along both the Victoria Street corridor and elsewhere in the city where they are currently not allowed. Should Council choose to approve this application, staff suggests the following restrictions for the proposed digital billboard as detailed in the staff report. Introduce daytime and nighttime luminance levels in the form of a NITS measure which staff can verify at the time of sign permit issuance. Provide a luminance measurement regulations at the street line that can be verified after installation. Comply with a 6-meter front yard setback to allow sight lines to business signs, and limit the size of the sign face to 12 square meters in area to be consistent with the maximum sign area for ground-supported signs on similar lots. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McCowan. We will have delegations up next as we have no questions of staff. No one's clicked in yet, so you're in? Okay. Okay, just trying to get back to the screen. Okay. Before I call delegations, just to all the delegations, while public participation is welcomed at meetings, we are committed to engaging in respectful and constructive dialogue with members of the community, and conducting yourself in any of the following manners may result in an immediate removal from the meeting: interrupting councillors, staff, or other delegations, derogatory statements about councillors, staff, or others, and hate speech or defamatory comments. One last reminder for delegates: please do not take offense if following your presentation there are no questions from council. This council's time is to really listen and reflect upon the opinions and ideas shared with us from our community members. And with that, we have our delegate Mr. Dave Hannum from Zelenko Primo Limited, and is he online? Ready? Okay. Okay, Mr. Hannum, are you ready to go? We ask that you please bear with us. We're good. Okay, Mr. Hannon, can you hear? Can you hear us? Mr. Hannum, can you try speaking? Yeah. We'll take a 5-minute recess as we work out some of these issues. Thank you.
Dave, do you mind trying to go ahead and unmute yourself? Dave, do you mind going ahead and trying to unmute yourself?
Can you hear us now?
Hello, hello. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now, Dave. So,
Excellent. Wonderful.
okay.
Good evening.
Just want to confirm before we start, can you hear me as well?
Can you hear my colleague Ozor as well?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful.
Okay, thank you.
So when you're ready.
Perfect. Well, look, good evening, members of committee. My name's Dave Hannam. I'm a partner and registered professional planner with London and Toronto-based planning firm Zelenka Priamo Limited. Also here tonight is my colleague Ozor Davis. Ozor is going to walk you through a short visual presentation and do most of the talking moving forward as well. We're hopeful that the committee will lend support to the signage bylaw amendment application. I think it's important that when we're considering the merits of the application itself, it's important to acknowledge what signage we are proposing to replace on site. We have an existing large and aging externally illuminated billboard sign on the property, which is permitted and legally could remain in its current form in perpetuity. But what we're proposing is to replace it with a significantly smaller, modern, attractive-looking electronic billboard, which includes tech that allows for the efficient control of content and especially the control of the timing, the duration, and the nature of the illumination of that messaging as well. So apart from the type of proposed electronic signage that we're proposing, the physical sign itself generally complies with the regulations in the sign bylaw. And in our opinion, actually reduces the sign clutter and enhances the streetscape, and is given the context, is not anticipated to result in any significant impacts to the public domain. Furthermore, our client is willing to make some further concessions and revisions to the sign to address some of the staff's mitigation measures. Ozor is going to discuss that in greater detail. And as such, we would respectfully request that the committee approves the sign bylaw. So I'll pass it over to Ozor, who can roll through the presentation. We'll be happy to answer any questions at the end. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Dave. So you can just leave it there on slide 2. So just for some brief planning context, the lands are identified within an arterial corridor by the official plan. The intended function is to, quote, predominantly serve those traveling by automobile. The lands are further designated for and zoned for commercial uses and are occupied by a permitted auto-oriented commercial use, as are the immediate lands in the area. You can please skip to slide 4. So as Dave touched on, there is an existing billboard in a similar location where we're proposing to replace the existing billboard. It currently has 4 sign faces total and is equipped with external illumination, which stays lit throughout the nighttime hours. And as you can see, the old sort of paper and glue copy type method is quite vulnerable to damage. Skip to the next slide, please. So the proposal to replace the existing sign with a double-sided electronic billboard, as illustrated in this basic elevation here, reduces the overall advertising area and the number of sign bases visible along the street. The sign is proposed to be disabled between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. and is proposed to also operate with maximum daytime and nighttime illumination levels, and will be equipped with a light monitor to automatically adjust the display's brightness as ambient conditions change. The proponent has also offered to enter into an agreement with the City of Kitchener to provide advertising time for notices, events, and other public messaging. As David had mentioned, it's our opinion that the replacement sign is representative of an improvement to the existing condition, and it's primarily requested to modernize the lawfully established billboard. Next slide, please. When evaluated against the requirements of the sign bylaw, It is our opinion that the extent of the requested amendments is generally quite minor and appropriate to consider given the existing and planned land use context of the Victoria Street corridor. We further note that the sign bylaw sets out minimum provisions with the purpose of protecting public safety and mitigating distractions, for example, through methods such as message display length, illumination duration, and proximity to an intersection. The proposed sign exceeds all such provisions, and additional illumination restrictions have been proposed in the application. In response to staff comments, the proponent is willing to increase the proposed front yard setback from 2 meters to match where the existing sign face is today to 5 meters, whereas the bylaw requires 6. Next slide, please. There's just a quick comparison of the easterly elevation, which summarizes the proposed improvements to the public realm through the reduced advertising area and faces and the restriction on illumination hours. Note that the image here for the proposed elevation, it does show that setback at 2 meters from the front property line, whereas this can be increased up to 5 meters. Next slide, please. So we've reviewed the staff report and would like to clarify that approval of this particular proposal would not necessarily set a precedent for modernizing other legal non-conforming billboards in the area. Any application is to be evaluated on its own individual merits and contexts, and any decision would be at the discretion of council. As for proposed distraction, the proposal generally complies with the relevant mitigation provisions, and no undue distractions would therefore be anticipated, nor were specific comments received from the City Transportation or Engineering staff. A reduction to the proposed front yard setback is reasonable to consider given the width of the adjacent right-of-way being 48 meters property line to property line on either side of Victoria. Regarding urban design, we do note that the planned function of this area by the official plan is to provide for auto-oriented uses, being commercial and employment uses, that the proposal is also consistent and compatible with, as well as with the extensive variety of existing signage present along the corridor. Given the public realm improvements the proposed sign will provide by replacing the existing billboard, which is lawfully permitted to remain indefinitely, as Dave had mentioned, it is our opinion that the proposal is within the public interest. Thank you, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. We do have some questions for you, Councillor Singh.
Yeah, thank you. Just trying to understand the broader context of the application and the staff recommendation for refusal. I think in your report or your presentation, you did outline some of the questions I had, but I'll just try to confirm, in a little bit more detail. The signage cost to put up a sign, are you able to give any details on that? Because you did say the ease with which the signage can be changed between different businesses, and the other question was going to be, would this allow opportunities to businesses to have for shorter duration as opposed to entering into very long-term contracts? So what I'm trying to understand is the overall reduction in cost and overall benefit to our business communities along that corridor.
So I can't speak to the financial costs as it relates to the operations of the sign. When touching on message duration, it's more about, when is that message going to flip through to another image? So the sign by law requires a minimum of 6 seconds, whereas we're proposing to operate the billboard with a 10-second message duration. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I'm happy to follow up.
It doesn't, but I will say this, it's more of a statement. I think irrespective of what happens today, this would need to be ratified for council, and I think it would be advent for you to have that information because it would help us to understand, again, with the change that you're requesting and the fact that staff recommendation is for refusal, we have to look at the broader benefit to the community, and that benefit is through cost, and having understanding of those costs would be helpful, in my mind anyways. Thank you.
Can I just ask a question with respect to that question? When you're talking about cost, are you talking about the opportunity cost to the wider public with regards to the ability to advertise more for the benefit of the community? Or are you talking about the cost associated with the installation of the sign?
No, I'm saying both. I'm saying currently, as the signs are, it's a physical kind of installation of the graphic material. So what the cost is currently, and what the cost would be, again, if you have an electronic sign for a business to want to place signage there, would be a cost and reduction for to them. So it's a saving to businesses and community members. Again, this does allow more broader usage. And the other is, the question was, would this, as an electronic sign that can be very quickly changed on the messaging, would it allow opportunities to have a shorter duration as opposed to where there's a significant upfront cost for installation that are physical, the graphics that are on the current sign right now. So you can take that information. I'm sure you as your colleague has said, that you're not familiar with the pro forma of that, but I think having that information to the council meeting would be helpful.
Sure. I understand the question now.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hannon, and thank you, Ms. Davis. We don't have any further questions. I will bring up questions for staff. Councillor Davey.
Yes, thank you. A couple questions. My first question is with respect to the setback. The proponent was originally asking for 2 meters, whereas the law is 6 meters. What is the, I don't think I saw it in the report, what's the current setback for the existing sign?
Through the chair, it's my understanding that the existing sign is set back approximately 2 meters.
Okay, so if we were to approve even their 5 meters, then it would be set back an extra 3 meters from where the current existing sign extends out towards the road?
Correct.
Okay, that's good. I had questions too on just like wondering, like I'm happy to see it, but in terms of the suggestions that staff put forward in terms of the brightness, just wondering where, where we got those reference numbers from, the 3,000 nits and the 150 nits?
Through the chair, we received the staff report from the applicants at Lincoln for Ammo, who included the NITS regulation. So that's the one that the manufacturer puts in place so that when staff are reviewing the sign bylaw, they know they can check that against what the sign bylaw regulation would be if it was approved with those. And then the one for after the sign is established, that would be for when you're out on the street. We ask for a certification after a sign's been installed. So we would ask for them to put the sign on bright and then turn it off and take the light levels in between from the right of way.
Okay, and the other question I had is, again, I'm inclined to support this replacement. So I guess my concern, though, is I guess I'm only speaking for myself at this point, but I'm sure other members of committee aren't interested in seeing any sort of proliferation of more billboards or a precedent of this being something that's going to happen like in new locations. So my understanding is essentially like legal non-conforming how it is now. So is there any sort of protection that we have, or is staff comfortable that we can continue that legal non-conforming with the provision that people are allowed to replace what is there, because it's not a new installation? To follow my question, I guess, yeah, just basically I'm concerned about keeping the grandfathering rule in place, but also not permitting other billboards from applications from being approved.
So through the chair, this application is site-specific. So if you make a decision on this particular sign, we would put a special regulation into the sign bylaw that is specific to this sign. So if there was another sign along the corridor that wanted to do the same thing, they're in the commercial zone lands, then they would also need to come to council for a sign bylaw amendment.
If it was a new location? Okay.
Well, if it was a new location, or if they were in a similar situation, one of the other 14 or 13 that are along the commercial corridor, if they wanted to come in and request a replacement of the static sign with a digital sign, they would have to come for a site-specific sign bylaw amendment.
So, and then specifically if it was a new location, and again, I just said I don't want to see any more new ones, and council were to refuse it, what's the appeal mechanism?
I'm sorry.
Like if a new billboard were to be proposed and it came forward in the same method and council declined it, is this something that can be appealed?
Through the chair, the council makes a final decision on sign bylaw amendments.
Okay, so the only real concern precedent then is that council changes its mind in the future? Okay.
Correct.
Okay, that's helpful, and I would have an alternate motion at the appropriate time, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Davey. Up next, we have Councillor Deneau.
Thank you, Chair. And I just have a quick clarification question. So the bylaw is 300 meters between other billboards, and they're looking for 215 meters between other billboards. So what is it currently right now between the sign that is existing and any other billboards?
Through the chair, it's 215 meters to the nearest billboard.
250?
Yeah, 215, 1-5.
215. What's that?
215
Yeah,
meters, almost a quarter of a mile.
yeah, okay.
Oh, no, quarter of a kilometer, sorry.
215, right? Right, no, okay, so right now it's 215. Okay, and so the 300 meters came into effect when? I guess after that initial sign was installed, I'm assuming?
So through the chair, back in 1995, council had concerns with the proliferation of billboards throughout the city. And so they asked staff to evaluate the sign regulations and the sign bylaw. So at that point, commercial zones allowed billboards. So the decision of council was to not allow them anymore in commercial zones, but any of the existing ones were considered legal and they can continue. And so that's the situation for this particular sign.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Deneau. Up next, we have Councillor Stretch.
Thank you. My question is for the delegate. So it's my understanding that the setback will go from 3 to 5, but what staff are recommending 6. What is the issue to go back that extra meter? Is there a practical issue there?
Through the chair, 6 meters is just a little impractical for visibility along the right-of-way. It is currently set back 2 meters, which was requested in our original submission. The proponent is able to go back 5 meters, but that's really the extent of how far back this can be pushed.
Why is that? Through the chair, sorry.
Through the chair, the visibility is just, it's not particularly viable setback 6 meters from the road, or from the property line, excuse me.
Okay, but just to be clear, of staff, you are recommending in the future that all setbacks are 6 meters?
Through the chair, we are recommending the consistent setback to what the sign bylaw allows.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stretch. Councillor Uwaduni.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to confirm, as a city, do we make any money from these signs?
Through the chair, the only money that we make from the sign is the revenue from the sign permit itself, but on a regular basis, we don't make money from the signs.
Okay, thank
it's
you.
a private sign.
Entrepreneurial spirit. Thank you. Councillor Davey.
Right, so just by way of motion, I would actually, I didn't write it out because staff actually covered like most of it on page 17 of 72 in the staff report. So I'm going to move approval of the replacement, subject to the first 2 conditions, which I'm very happy to see here, and that is limitation of the absolute luminescence and making sure that's automatic. I am going to move the setback be 5 meters as opposed to 6, and the last one actually is staff recommended an absolute size of the billboard to be 12 meters. I'm going to move 20.24 because that is the standard size of the billboards that are in place, and I would comment to it at the appropriate time. It looks like maybe now.
You're welcome to have your comments.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, it's I'm not again, I don't think I'm not a hugest fan of seeing a proliferation of billboards. I think we've all been in parts of the world where there's been too many, and it can be a bit of an eyesore. But if I'm being honest, I think in this situation, being the ward councillor, I think what we're going to have here is something that looks better. It's 56% of the size, so it's a lot smaller than the existing 2 billboards that are there. It's going to be actually moving further away from one of the reasons I'm happy with the setback to be a little bit closer to the road, because it's a tiny bit further away from the residential area, and also that further sign will be as well. And well, yeah, that's pretty much it. My biggest concern again was setting any sort of precedent, but I'm comfortable that if council has final authority, we won't be seeing any new applications for new billboards coming through anytime soon.
Okay. Thank you for your motion. Councillor Singh.
Yeah, I think Councillor Davies said it really best, that it doesn't really set a precedence because it can be a site-by-site application. Some places it will make sense, and some other places it doesn't. Where it absolutely does make sense is Lackner and Ottawa. It's a very busy intersection, and there isn't significant directly facing residential units that would be adversely impacted. Who would be, I think, benefit from this is, as I was trying to get to through my questions, are the businesses in the area that are seeking opportunities for advertisement on a roadway that is probably the highest volume of vehicular traffic. So what better place to advertise yourself? At a time where we are very cognizant of economy that is starting to shrink, we're looking at productivity that is taking a hit. Whatever this council can do to support businesses, I think this is a small measure. We have to move with the times. It wasn't as easy. The luminance wasn't as good of some of these signs. The technology has matured, and I'm sure over time it will get better. I think the opportunity to have more businesses to be able to advertise for shorter duration, and as well even an opportunity perhaps for community messaging, where it is not possible on a physical sign, where you have to have printing and have someone go there, install it, as opposed to someone putting a USB stick into a computer and all of a sudden you have a new message. I think this is the right course. So I would be very supportive of the direction that Councillor Davey wants us to move.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Verbanovic.
Thanks. I am happy to support the motion. I do share the concern that we don't want an over-proliferation of these, but I also recognize it's the 21st century, and these are an effective tool for communication, and it's quite frankly the direction that's things are moving in a number of municipalities. I know that in some of the GTA areas there have been sort of large video signs that are showing up on underpasses and so on, and they become a revenue stream. I do believe I'm aware of actually a reach out that's occurred even to us locally here to consider something on some lands that we don't own, but that would potentially provide a new opportunity for the city to communicate and provide messaging about things, events happening and things like that. I think some of us who sit on the Centre and the Square board noticed that the Centre and the Square used the one at the En Routes recently, the new signs for Jagged Little Pill promotion. And it got a bunch of people talking about it because it was a new way of communicating. And so I think we just need to recognize that some of that needs to happen, and the question is where is it appropriate, and how do we make sure the hours of operation are correct, and we're minimizing impact onto the surrounding environment and so on.
Thank you, Mayor Verbanovic, and I'll add my comments. I share the same sentiment as my colleagues. I feel in this day and age of technology and where everything is online, this is a way of upgrading an old-fashioned way of traditional marketing, and it's good to see, and I know it always grabs my attention as well when you're driving by and seeing these signs. So, are you back in? Go ahead.
There was one thing that I think the applicant did say, which was a suggestion of a blackout between 11, I think, p.m. and 6 a.m. And Councillor Davey, did your motion capture that, or are you open to capturing that?
Councillor Davey?
No, it did not. I don't have a personal preference either way, only because I'm a bit of a nerd, so I know how valuable brightness is. So the 150 nits that's permitted over evening at nighttime that will automatically kick in is about half the brightness of the monitor screen you're looking at in front of you. So that's going to be very, very dim for any surrounding residences. So I'm easy either way, but I did not include it.
I actually, you know what, I actually would suggest that, oh, maybe I'll ask staff first. If we did put in a time frame now, could that be revisited in the future without a process, or?
Through the chair, if you put it into the sign bylaw amendment, it would become a special regulation that the sign would have to meet. So the next time that the sign bylaw was amended, it could be amended, but it would have to be a decision of council in the future to take it out.
And is there a way to do it in light of the openness of this applicant to do it? Is there a way to incorporate it without putting it actually into the bylaw?
Through the chair, there's no, the legal mechanism that we use to issue a sign permit is going to be based on the sign bylaw.
So there's no way where we could say, we're doing it, we're approving it, and but one of the conditions is that the operator agree on a site-specific operation time of whatever, 6 to 11.
Through the chair, if you want the bylaw regulated through, from an enforcement perspective, it should be in the bylaw.
I guess where I'm going,
Point of clarification. Go ahead, Council.
Just to add further, just for more clarity, I'm going to go a little bit of an opposite way, so still trying to get to the essence that, Mayor Barry, that you're trying to do. Could we look at the other way of allowance for a year, and that automatically there's a sunset, and so if they want to carry on, they would have to come back, so that way we can have an opportunity to see if there's any complaints that we're seeing in the area. Would that be easier within the sign bylaw?
Through the chair, you could put a sunset clause into the sign bylaw. It would require an application fee for the applicant to come back to this council and go through the process again. For
How much is an application fee?
We'd have to look at it.
Okay, perhaps you can look it up, and I think Mayor Barry wanted to say something more.
Yeah, so, part of what I'm thinking about as we do this is just, it is a bit of a new direction, and so I'm always cognizant around precedents. And so I'm wondering if we actually do that blackout, and we can always do a city-initiated time change if, in conversation with the operator, it becomes an issue, and then they don't have to go through an application process and stuff.
Councillor Davey?
Yeah, thank you. Just occurred to me, though, too, if we're going to go in this direction, too, I'm not sure if the delegate's still online, but I would like just ask them if that impacts their business model, like if they're planning to sell advertising, I guess, in the later hours at that 150 nits brightness, if that's going to break their model. We should probably know that before we make this decision. I thought it said in the report that they were actually going to have it off in their own report, but if they can confirm that they did.
I thought I read that, too.
Okay, well, we can always change things if they're not here anymore. We can always change things between now and
They're still there.
Oh, we're still there, okay.
Look, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Look, ultimately, the client would like to have as much flexibility as possible with respect to that, and we feel as though there is enough flexibility within the provisions with regards to illumination and the technology within the sign to address those concerns. If it's a complete pinch point with council, I'm sure that the client would be willing to follow those timeframes in there, as long as there's an opportunity to not close the door and circle back to council at a later date, subject to confirmation that there hasn't been any specific issues. And when we talk about issues, typically those are complaints associated with residential development. And as our materials have confirmed, we're hundreds of metres from the nearest residential property and shielded by the existing buildings and vegetation, etc. So I don't anticipate any particular compatibility issues with respect to that. And coupled with the ability to be able to control illumination, I don't think it's going to be an issue. But if it's a deal breaker for council, then the client would prefer to get the approval if there's going to be a condition, as long as we can revisit it at a later date.
There we go.
Go ahead.
But Mr. Hannam, it was originally your client that, or you on behalf of your client, that offered that suggestion up, was it not?
Yeah, as part of the revisions to address staff's request for mitigation measures, you're correct. That is something that was offered up.
So in light of that, I think I'd be inclined to suggest an amendment that we, and maybe instead of 11 to 6, we say midnight to 6. It's off, and quite frankly, it's something we can revisit and initiate based on dialogue with the person in the beginning, but it also doesn't set a precedent that's harder to pull back. It's always easier to add as opposed to take away. So that would be my suggestion on an amendment, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you for your amendment. I'm just wondering, Councillor Davey, would you be good with incorporating that in your motion? That way we have to deal with one item instead of two.
I'm fine with that.
Okay. Okay, and I'll just continue my comments before we vote on that. I'll just, I think, again, as the times are changing with the way marketing is moving with technology, I think also too, outside of this one, but maybe if we are starting to see more of these come to us, maybe we should start thinking of a little bit of a revenue stream as suggested by Councillor Dooney, because they are getting a significant upgrade in the type of a marketing tool that can actually generate far more revenue than what is currently there. So anyways, with that, it's been moved by Councillor Davey. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Back to you.
What?
Okay, we are going to move on to our next item. Pretty exciting. It's the Bram Yards Master Plan Visioning, and Mr. Brown will be providing a 5-minute presentation. Sure. When you're ready. Oh, Mr. Bloom, you started kicking us off? Okay, go ahead.
So through the chair, members of council, we're delighted and excited to bring forward to you for your consideration vision and development principles for the Bram Yards. We're excited for many reasons. First, it's one of the largest sites within the city's land portfolio, which presents a significant opportunity to steward an impactful development for our community. The city's ambition to build an innovation district dates back more than 20 years with the initial investment in the UW Health Sciences campus and the School of Pharmacy, and more recently, Council's investment in the innovation arena. Bram lands also play a significant role in Make It Kitchener 2.0, both as an opportunity to realize a new urban business park focused on health innovation, but also the land sale value and opportunity to reinvest those dollars into other areas of focus, such as affordable housing. And lastly, with all of the development approvals that have been considered around the Bram Yards, which as many as potentially 14 major developments in and around the Brom Yards. Brom has an opportunity to become a central focal point of a new community that's emerging in the Innovation District. So from our lens, it's a really significant opportunity for the city and council to steward a really significant resource for our community. There are many components to the staff report. My colleague, Mr. Brown, is going to lead you through the public engagement component, and then if you have questions on the other aspects, we'll be happy to answer those after. So over to my colleague.
Thank you. I'll begin and try to be brief in the next 3 minutes and 33 seconds. Please look at the aerial photo that's on the slide in front of you. It gives you an example of what Brom is, which is the area to the bottom of it, approximately 8 acres. It is bounded by Park Street in that photo on the right, Joseph on the left. To the bottom, you see the railway tracks, and then Brom kind of fits up in the middle off of Victoria Street. So the significant part about this, and unless you've walked the property, is that there's a dramatic change topography-wise. As you go from Joseph towards Park, it drops approximately anywhere between 10 and 12 feet in distance, which makes it a very kind of unique development site in itself. So part of the process that began back in August in doing an engagement project. So from August of 2023 until December of 2023, we took 20 weeks to sit down and talk to as many people as we possibly could, residents and stakeholders, in order to be able to find consensus on the direction and vision for the Bram Yards. We used 4 models or 4 tools specifically in order to achieve that. First one being is the Engage Kitchener website, i.e. the online platform. We were able to not only provide a general opportunity for information for anyone that was interested, but we also included an extensive survey that was there. What we're very happy about and what we say, or what I can say, is that there's a number of people that are very interested and excited about the project, and it can be told by the numbers. We had 8,400 page views, 4,600 plus in page visits, 388 survey completions from 11 different postal codes. Now, what's significant about that is that 388 is an extraordinary number. We were expecting somewhere around the 200 range when we began, and 388 gives us certainly a broader sample. But more importantly, that sample is citywide. So approximately 60% is located within the 3 postal codes of downtown, with the remaining 40% consisting of 8 other postal codes throughout the rest of the city. So we have not only a downtown perspective, but also a citywide perspective, which is important for a project of this size. We held an open house meeting at the Victoria Park Pavilion, of which we had over 30 participants attend. There were some great conversations and discussions. What's important about having an open house meeting is to allow people to have an unstructured way to address staff and be able to ask questions specifically about it. And there was certainly an excellent evening that way. And 30 people that were there amazingly attended and participated in other ways as we went along. We had used focus groups and community meetings, so a health innovation focus group representing 13 not-for-profit, institutional and entrepreneurial organizations that participated in that. Board of Directors meeting for the Downtown Kitchener BIA, and then we had an evening with the local neighborhood associations of Victoria Park, Cherry Park, and Old Berlin. In the document, what we heard, you'll see in Appendix A, the Victoria Park Neighborhood Association policy paper. So they felt very strongly about it and certainly provided us with a clear page of what they were looking for. And then finally, we had advisory committee meetings, of which we attended 4, and we received consultation from Economic Development, Downtown, Active, Transportation and Trails, and then Arts and Culture. So we sat down with all of those people, asked them about the proposed vision and development principles, and we looked for consensus. We had a broad and varying response from everyone, but where did people agree? And using that information, we gathered it together and applied it to the vision and development principles to make some relatively minor but important revisions to them. As you can see in the yellow text is where the revisions or the additions to it have been included. What it is it's certainly a more important recognition of the importance of the employment space and land opportunity that's at Brom. That's certainly the first part of the vision. Affordable housing, which is certainly a predominant conversation that happened in all of the engagement processes and that we were involved with. And then this idea of centered around vibrant spaces. And to more extent of that, The overwhelming feeling is that the spaces between the buildings, that's actually what we talked about 90% of the time, is that it's a place of congregation, i.e., as Corey mentioned, there's 14 different towers in different stages of development and construction. As those people come out of there, where are they going to go? And Brom Yards is proposed to be where that would be, and that is through some not specific park-type spaces, but rather more of a generic green space with tree canopy was the overwhelming. So people weren't looking for single-purpose park space, i.e. a dog park or a splash pad or something like that, but much more a general green space by which you can take your dog for a walk, you can take your children and go and play in that area, or you can meet up with friends and have a sociable area. And then all built around this idea of using a leading sustainability practices. So not only when they were talking about that was it including the district energy project, i.e. using of geothermal for heating and cooling, but even broader practices including solar, water reclamation, active transportation connections. Those are all pieces. And as you can see in the chart below, community spaces and affordable housing were the top two proposed revisions. Proposed revision number 1, development principle, is around integrated mixed uses. This idea that the property is going to have a variety of uses. Not only is it going to have employment space for innovation, but it also have residential, commercial, and retail. But more importantly, because of the inclusionary zoning bylaw and this being within that boundary of that, the idea of affordable housing, but the predominant discussion, as I said, is affordable housing needed to be included on the site. Certainly variances of opinion as to the volume of affordable housing that should be included, but nonetheless affordable housing is part of the discussion. Proposed revision number 2, which is integrating leading sustainability practices. It gets back to what I just mentioned, which is extraordinary support for the district energy plant and the idea of using geothermal heating and cooling, but also other sustainable development practices, and including that idea of using recognition of a net zero carbon emission type site or certification that way. What you have to recognize is that 85.93% of survey respondents indicated sustainability or sustainable development practices must be included in the site. A remark that sticks with me is that someone said it's not going to get any cooler outside. That the idea is that the heat and expansion is in front of us. Sustainable development practices will recognize that we're going to do something towards that. Proposed or revised government number 3 principle, which is focal community spaces. This is once again coming back to this idea of congregation and the spaces between the buildings, and that the need for the development to recognize it. In a lot of cases, when people think about development of large parcel of lands, they think of buildings and those components that are with it, and the spaces between them are almost a secondary thought as opposed to primary. Because of the level of support that was done for community spaces and the need for inclusion based on that, focal community spaces is what we're talking about. Organizing the development around central community spaces is an important aspect of it, and to include it as usable green space. Emphasis over and over again, not looking for single source type of park space, but rather generic open green space with tree canopy. What we have removed from development principle number 3 is the inclusion of community space to be retained by the city. That was more directed to the park because there is no specific request for a certain type of park that has been included as the consensus expression from everyone that participated in the engagement process. We've looked to remove that out of there so that it becomes incorporated as part of the larger development itself. And lastly, proposal revision number 4, which the principle is design expectations. As you can see from the chart there, active transportation connections, so we've included bike lanes, and then reduction of automobile parking is certainly one of the discussions. There's a recognition, there's a necessity for parking, there's a recognition for a necessity of public parking because of the enormous amount of parking that's there now. The idea is they don't want surface lots. They don't want to have where there's multiple cars stacked up. They want to have it driven towards more using the Ion Hub, which is going to get built up the road, the Iron Horse Trail, which is going to be attached. Those are where people are looking for this development to move towards. So now that we have an understanding of kind of how the engagement process is kind of altered the vision and the development principles, the next part is what is included in the staff report that's been presented in front of you, and essentially the next steps are the 4 pieces. So staff is looking for approval for the revised Vision BRAM development principles as presented, looking for funding in order to do the pre-design reports required for the site. People have asked us, why are we doing those? The expectation is, the pre-design reports is really to make it a transparent transaction when you're looking to develop the property. Anybody that's going to come in and invest hundreds of millions of dollars in the property is going to want to know what's going on there environmentally, is going to want to know from a hydrological assessment standpoint, i.e., can we have underground parking because of the water levels that are in downtown, and also to understand whether the soils there can support large structures on them. After that, we've included environmental assessment and remediation plan. The idea is if you do find it there, which we suspect because of previous use as a city works yard and having in-ground pumps, if you walk on site, you can see that there is some expectation of that, is to have a plan of action on how to remediate that and move it forward. Finally, discussing about analysis of various codes. When we talked about innovation space there, we're talking about not generic office space, but what you're talking about is lab space, wet lab, dry lab space, which are very, very specific in what their requirements are and very specific when it comes to building code and fire code requirements. What I want to make very clear is that the conversion of existing vacant office space in downtown to convert it to wet lab space, the type of space that is necessary to attract and retain innovation business, directly from entrepreneurs' mouth that have done it, the regulation aspect of it, the cost and the timelines to do it, creates an impediment to being able to retain businesses or innovation-style businesses. And given that Council has made significant investments not only in the innovation arena and with Communitech, Velocity, and all of the innovation district to itself, as those businesses come out of those incubation period, it would be nice to retain them. How do we do that? If we don't have the correct type of space to do that, then what you're doing is allowing them to cast an eye to move outside of your area and to lose those opportunities. So we need to be able to have an understanding, whoever comes in to develop, to understand this is what the requirements are to build inside the buildings themselves. And then finally, understanding the design and setback requirements for the railway line. Because it borders right onto the property, there's going to be a need or clarity in being able to understand that there are 30-meter setbacks and that there's ways of changing that with different types of structures, but it certainly is a serious consideration. The idea of pre-design reports, once again, is back to having a transparent transaction. We want people to understand what they're getting involved in, what they're going to invest their money in, and how's the best. And if they have that, then they can make the best business case for them that's possible while achieving the vision and then ultimately having a very positive development in downtown Kitchener. Yep. Oh, sorry, I'm going to wind this up. Pardon me. Market sounding analysis. So once we figured out the pre-design, market sounding analysis is really about looking at the marketplace and trying to figure out when is the best time to place the property out for disposition, i.e., when do we go to marketplace, when would this be the best time to develop. You're going to have some time related to it because the pre-design reports can take up to 96 weeks, so that to sit down and look at it, given interest rates, given inflation, given other demands for residential demand, market demand for innovation space, is important to be able to make it successful. And then finally, the last one is the land disposition process, which is a public RFP that would go out and you would look for responses to it. Apologize for taking too long. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. There are 4 people in the queue with questions. 5 now. Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Chair Davey, and thank you, Mr. Brown, for your presentation. I absolutely love your enthusiasm about this project, and you're probably like me in that you wish that the Bram yards were 5 times the size of what they are, so that we could be doing a lot more things. Because it is a lot to try and balance and include all these different things here in this space. I had a question around the 41% of people said they were really interested in having this be a community space. I'm wondering if you can comment some on that and how you talked about economic development with the community groups as well.
Through the chair. There we go. Pardon me. Through the chair to Councillor. The idea of community space was actually not something that I brought to the table, but rather the community groups that we spoke to, because they felt so passionate about it. I mean, a lot of our meetings, some of the councillors here at the table were involved with it, and they certainly can witness to the passion that was there. But I think it's an incredibly important part of being able to make it a human-centric development, i.e. you're looking at creating a space that people actually want to be involved in. It will support not only bringing how do you attract talent into innovation businesses, but it's not just the office that they're going to, but the environment on a larger basis. How do you make successful retail and commercial space? People want to be in that space. And that's where the community space and the idea of creating congregation is, I think, not only a positive from a community standpoint, but also from an economic development standpoint. That's essentially where it needs to go, and that's clearly what they've stated to us.
Yeah, thank you. And were you able to present to them, you know, the vision around needing those health innovation companies and the type of space and that they need, like the green rooms, the labs, etc.?
Yeah, no, certainly we talked about the wet lab space, the dry lab space, and the specialists, because part of the discussion is why can't we convert our existing vacant office space into that? And then we explained very clearly what the answers that we received from entrepreneurs on the difficult regulatory aspects and the timelines to do that and how it was an impediment. It's not only important that those spaces are built, but they must be scalable, i.e. whether you have a startup or a scale-up type business, they may want a small footprint to begin with, but they'll demand more as the company grows, and it's important. Yes, not everybody understood exactly the details involved when it came to the wet space, but certainly they understood the demand requirements. And you had over 67% of survey response indicating that the employment or the innovation employment aspect of it is absolutely essential. When you add that to the strategic vision for the city, including that as well, it was a very clear and easy definable way for people to express that they thought Brahm should move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we've been speaking, you know, about other groups, is that we want them to come here, use those spaces downtown, and then we want them to stay and to grow here. And I think by including those community spaces and that in there too, and developing that sense of community here whenever we put this together, then I think that's going to be a really important piece. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair Davey, and thank you, Mr. Brown, for your presentation. I guess my question is with regards to when we looked at the next steps, and in the process, I saw that record of site condition was in there. So my understanding to get a record of site condition, when we need to be able to ensure that the site is not contaminated.
In order to build residential development on that site, you have to bring it to a certain level of remediation, i.e. it has to be to a certain standard environmentally. Included in that is a record of site condition in order to be able to move forward for residential development. It's held at a different standard than what commercial is, so that's why that's included in there. So from the standpoint of initiation forward, you're going to get to the remediation plan, and then as the site is cleaned up or as any type of contamination is cleared, then the record of site condition would come after that.
Okay, all right, that makes more sense to me. I just thought do the record of site condition and then hand it over. And
the expectation is whoever the master developer is for the site is going to clean up the remediation on it. We have a sense of what's there from previous environmental site assessment reports in 2004, 5, and 2013. But it's been 11 years. There's any number of issues that need to be made sure that they're clarified and that we have a clear answer and we're not just guessing.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Chair, when the time's appropriate, I'm prepared to move the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Michaud.
Thank you, and thank you for this report. A lot of great work done here, and your presentation was, as Councillor Johnson said, very exciting, and you were very excited about it, so that's great. I'm curious about the community space, and could you give me an example of what you envision the community space looking like. You said it wouldn't necessarily be a park. It's not going to be grass and trees. So what could, like, just a sample of it would look like?
I think Mr. Bloom's taking this one.
So through the chair, so what I think struck many of us is the comments that we heard for those that have moved into the area, especially those that are living in some of the condo towers and larger residential buildings. What they're missing is a place to go. So where do you go to meet friends? Where do you go to socialize? King Street, the shops on King Street are pretty far. And I think that's what we understood them to say is they want a gathering place. And it could be a streetscape that has shops and restaurants. It could be a park space. It could be any of those items. But it's really about coming together as community, and the ability to socialize together was, I think, at the essence of what they're looking for.
So I envision something similar to Vogelzang Green, spaces like that. Is that?
So through the chair, it could be that. It could also be a pedestrianized street with restaurants that lie in the street, and or both. I think that's really, it was about how they come together and gather as a community, and it could come in different forms.
I do like it. I think the whole plan is great. I'll support it 100%. I just I'd like to see some green space incorporated in this, whether people think they need it or not. I think you made the comment that, we have to keep the temperatures down, and it's the trees that keep the temperatures down. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Rabinovich.
That was bad. Thanks, Chair Davey, and thanks to everyone for the good work done on this report, and I think capturing a good vision for lands that, for many years were used to serve this community through it being our operations yard, and I think what's being proposed here will certainly be a very exciting vision for it. I do have a couple questions, though, and the first one has to do with the notion of a master developer, and part of this has to do with some of what the region learned previously, and they're still in the midst of dealing with respect to the Central Transit Facility, is that there's people typically in the development business are in it for different things. So some are in it for residential, some are in for commercial. They don't often cross, other than ancillary uses, because the office market and being that type of company is very different than someone who's in to either build residential, hold in the long term, or build residential and get out and move on to the next project. And so I'm just a little concerned if we're exclusively saying master developer. Like, I like the vision, and maybe that needs to be what we reward ultimately in the point structure for the evaluations. But I'm concerned that we don't limit ourselves in the number of potential players that may come forward simply because they feel they can't be all things to all people, and sometimes trying to get them collaborating between each other can be tough.
So through the chair, I'd agree there aren't too many companies that build mixed use in the form we're talking about at this scale. There are some. I think what really for us, so it could be one developer. We may find a developer that has the capacity. It could be a consortium. I think there's a variety of different ways it could be met. I think for us, what is key is making sure that there is a singular vision, at least at the outset, that somebody is building towards a comprehensive vision as opposed to only asking for half of the site and then having to figure out the remnant half. So my recommendation is we proceed down a path and hope that we can find, whether it's a master developer or consortium or some centralized leadership for the site. If that doesn't produce the kind of outcome we would want, then we can always revisit that down the road. But I agree, we should be thinking about how we make sure as many people can possibly bid as possible.
Yeah, so I think that's going to be key, and part of our messaging then when we do that, I mean, we're obviously going to look to see this be successful, but I think we also need to be cautious on our messaging that if in fact, because of market conditions and a whole pile of things, we don't get many applicants, that it doesn't be seen as a failure, but rather we're being ambitious here in terms of what we're trying to achieve. There's not a lot of players in that market, and therefore we just need to do some level setting in the beginning in that regard. The second thing, and I go back to Center Block, is there were a number of things that in the original application that were priorities for us in putting that block to market, and they included some of the some green innovation and a number of other things that aligned with the city's values and priorities. How will that be captured through this process? And going along with that, and I heard my colleagues talk about green space. I also think some public art. I mean, if you think about some of the larger scale developments in Toronto, public art is incorporated into that as well. How will that be factored in and/or evaluated as part of the process?
So through the chair, in multiple ways. I think initially, based on should council approve a vision tonight, one of our next steps is to figure out how we translate that into an RFP and the elements that we will score proposals against. Certainly, I think we would be looking. There is a bar that has to be met based on the vision that proposals will have to meet. Secondly, once we actually, if there's a proponent that council likes, there's a development agreement, and I think in the agreement is where we solidify the various elements of the vision and making sure that they're cast into the actual final design. So there will be multiple opportunities in which we can make sure these are embedded.
So I'll just ask, and then, Mr. Chair, I have more questions. I don't know if there's others in the queue. Okay, so I'll come back, but just as a follow-up to that one. So are you saying, Mr. Bloom, that the RFP document, before it goes public, will come back here to council for ratification, so that if we want to see some things included or the weighting of things adjusted, that's something that council will have a say in?
So through the chair, so as part of our recommendation, we have not suggested that. We've suggested that we will take council's direction on the vision and develop the RFP. If that's something that council wants to see come back, that's the direction you'd have to add to staff.
Okay, so certainly that's one thing that I would like to see included in the recommendation. So can't remember, I think somebody said they were going to move that, so I'm hoping that
Councillor
include that. Okay.
Noted. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you. I actually had an amendment that I wanted to make along those same lines. What I wanted to ask for was that the RFP be deferred until the environmental assessment and the market assessment have been completed, so that we have a better picture of exactly what we're working with here. So, but I'll leave that for a moment because I do have some questions. So how many new residents will be living in the 14 new developments that were mentioned? Do you have a number?
Through the chair, I would hazard to whatever I guess will be inaccurate, but I would imagine if you would say at least 300 people per resident, you're probably looking at somewhere on a scale of 3,000 to 7,000 people. Big, very big ballpark numbers. I'm probably wrong, but hopefully somewhere in that range I'd be correct.
Okay, thank you. And the contamination or the state of the land itself was mentioned. Can you give us sort of an overview of the contamination that has been found over the previous years when it was studied?
Yes, I can. It's on an anecdotal basis. You have to understand it's based on the responses that we receive. But essentially what they found is kind of three pieces. One, there's previously fuel tanks on site, in ground, so there's the potential for contamination as it relates to that. The second part would be is that what was related to me on an anecdotal basis, that there was a used oil tank that stored used motor oil that came out of vehicles, and it was in ground. They believe it's been removed, but there may be residual that sits in the ground, as well as the third piece of it, which is indicated in the 30s that there was an incinerary plant in the city of Kitchener, and that there may have been some ash as some leveling materials in the lower part of Brom, i.e. closer towards Park Street. It's entirely possible that that's been removed when they went to go pave the parking lot, i.e. they put a different substrate in as opposed to that. But those are the ones that anecdotally have been expressed to me, that could be a potential problem. Simply by being a roads yard and you're having salt and different things on site, the expectation to have some type of contamination is, I think, only realistic.
Right. Okay. That's good. Regarding the green space, so I won't make comments right now. Let's try to stick to questions. What is the size of the outdoor green area you're anticipating? Like, I know the VPNA requested 40%. Are we close to that, or what are your thoughts?
I think that will depend on the applicants to the RFP process, and that they will stipulate. Certainly, they will have access to the information that's available from the engagement process, including the information from the Victoria Park Neighborhood Association, and then at that point they would make a decision in their application as how or how much green space would be included, and then those proposals would be evaluated on the volume of green space and the achievement of that desired outcome.
Okay, thank you. Got notes all over the place here, sorry. My other question had to do with, so we're selling this property. Why are we selling it and not retaining it and leasing it out, let's say a 99-year lease or something like that? Like, has that been considered? How much power do we lose as far as what actually will end up on this property? Not what our vision is, but what will actually end up on it if we sell the property?
So through the chair, I would suggest that a development of this size and scale, which will take, many, many years to come to fruition, it would be very difficult to have somebody interested in doing that on a lease basis, the amount of equity that they would have to put in. So I think the ideal scenario would be a sale. That said, there are points along, for example, the agreement of purchase and sale can be highly conditioned upon them meeting a variety of criteria, which is really wed to the vision and the development proposal that they propose. In other words, there are many protections we can put in place to make sure we don't sell the land and they turn around and decide they're going to do something completely different than what was approved by council. Typically in the past, we wouldn't actually even transact the land until they're at a point of building permits. They would have gone through significant planning process to make sure that what gets built is what was promised to the community.
Right. So there's no thought of severing the land and doing it in segments. You want this master developer to take on the whole project. And I mean, it's such a huge, important city asset, right? One of the only assets, I presume, I think it said that in the report, that the city actually owns at this point. Yeah. And it's in a very strategic spot when we think about the deficit of parkland in the downtown core in particular. And, it just seems that it's really important that we have controls in place, right? So have you thought about segmenting the land in any way?
Before you answer, Mr. Bloom, Mr. Chapman, did you have?
That was a question.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just want to respond to the first part of the question around why sale and not land lease. I want to remind Council that when you approved Economic Development Investment Fund 2.0, $80 million of the $110 million is to be generated through land sales. And Council has made commitments already and spent money out of that fund. And so a primary objective for this process has to be to maximize the land sale proceeds from this site, primarily for innovation employment. And so the input has been helpful to help frame the other criteria and the objectives for the site. But I just want to remind Council that you've committed to raise $80 million in land sales. This is the best opportunity to do that. And so to maximize those proceeds is key to fund investments that you've committed to.
Right.
Ms. Bloom?
And through the chair, there's a few reasons why we think a master developer approach is appropriate, and Mr. Brown touched on the grade difference. It wouldn't be very easy to subdivide the land and be able to see a really well-integrated development just because of the significant grade change. And so that said, though, I think there's always opportunity as we, there will be a negotiation stage down the line with a proponent, and if there are opportunities for us in those negotiations to retain portions of the parcel, then I think we can always be open to that consideration. It's hard to know until you actually see proposals from proponents.
Is my time, am I way over my time?
Yeah, you can keep back in, actually.
Okay,
If you're,
thanks.
Councillor Stretch?
I just have comments, so I can wait.
Yeah, sure, you can keep back in then too. Councillor Schneider?
Thank you, Chair Davey. Great work on this. This is really exciting. I think the good news is it doesn't have to be one thing or another. It can be a combination of a lot of great things. I was just wondering if anything came up during the discussions with the innovation arena there, and we're sure to get some amazing innovations and products to maybe pilot. Is the thought of like clinics that would maybe allow for the piloting or testing of some of these new innovations be possible?
So through the chair, that was part of the, if you recall, we hosted one focus group with industry experts, really to understand, like, if we go down this path, do they foresee that there'd be significant interest? And the answer was unequivocally yes, that this is health innovation will be a big part of our future economy, and this is an opportunity for us to support that growth.
Okay, great. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you. Just actually, that's a good segue, because my question was going to be, it hasn't really been, I don't think, directly answered, but why is it we're focusing exclusively really on health innovation and not a broader mandate?
So through the chair, largely, so in Make It Kitchener, we identified areas in which we need our economy to grow in order for our community to remain competitive, much like we made that decision 20 years ago to begin to invest in tech as a driving industry. Just to recall, the reasons for that was with the aging of our population, there's going to be significant demands on our healthcare system, which means innovation is going to have to arise, which means new company growth, new jobs, et cetera. As Mr. Brown alluded to, many of those require very specialized space, and I think this is an opportunity for us to as a community, be leaders in that space, but just given the proximity to the innovation arena, which will be producing these companies, we just think it makes absolute logical sense for us to do that. If the ultimate result is a mix of health innovation and other office employment, I don't think I would object to that, but certainly I think we want to make sure that at least through the proposal process, that there is, an attempt to see what we can accomplish on the health innovation front.
Okay, so I think you sort of answered my next question then. So a great proposal comes forward, it leverages maybe a different part of the tech sector, but it doesn't touch health innovation at all. Is that something that we would still consider?
So through Chair, again, Council will have the options. I mean, we will, there will be multiple criteria that would be set, and that would be one, and then Council ultimately gets to decide based on the proposals. And I think what you would, ideally, you'll have multiple proposals, and you may have a proposal that has no health innovation office, but you'll have others that do, and then you get to make a decision as to the direction that we ultimately want to go.
Mr. Chapman?
Through Mr. Chair. But what I would reiterate today for Council is that the two primary criteria that we understand based on previous Council decisions are, one, that we need to maximize the revenue from the sale of the site to fund the program, and secondly, that innovation employment is the primary objective here. And so obviously there's a focus on health innovation given the School of Pharmacy, the School of Medicine, Velocity with a focus on health innovation. There's a natural complementary function there. And I would agree with Mr. Bloom's comment that innovation employment is the goal. We would be concerned if any proponent comes in without recognizing the benefit of investing in health innovation in proximity to all of the other investments in health innovation that are happening in that district.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to think on that personally. Where is he going next with this? Yeah, actually, I'll just cue back in. In terms of, again, so Mayor Rabinovich suggested that staff return. I just want to make sure, because it sounds like it's going to be an amendment, and I want to make sure I'm clear on this. One of my concerns, and again, it's not from any sort of intimate knowledge with the transit hub, but one of my concerns in situations like this when there's already a hopeful master developer is, frankly, 11 different voices on council putting a million different hopes and dreams for a single site, and it becomes so onerous that no developer is interested. Was there, it wasn't in the report, but was staff planning on coming back and asking for council's specific input on different items with this site, or was it, was the plan to go basically from this and move on to the other components we were looking for?
So through the chair, maybe a couple of contextual components. So one, in the a few months ago, you approved an overall land disposition process, and within that process, generally speaking, what we had set out was council's purpose. Council's role is to set the vision, and it's our job to interpret that vision into an RFP, and typically not come back to council, but for council to trust staff. We appreciate this is a major site, and there may be times where you want to see those come back, and I think that's within your purview to direct. I think one clear, so I have had a conversation with the clerk around this. So just to be clear, there's no grounds for caucus for that to be a caucus discussion, so that would be a public discussion, unless there are items that you would want to frame for negotiation. So to your point, yes, it would be, I think we would bring back how we would rate the criteria, ones that we might feel are mandatory versus rated criteria, and then council as a collective would weigh in on that if we went that route.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Rabinovich.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks very much. And I think it is important now. Folks around the Horseshoe won't recall when we disposed of Center Block, but there was significant rigor put into the process when we did Center Block, and that was at a time when, quite frankly, there wasn't a lot of interest in developing in downtown Kitchener. I will say that at one point in the process there were some really exciting proposals, but market conditions were such that they didn't move forward. And in the end, I think we got a really good, viable project. But it was a very different time than it is today. I do think that as we look at this property, the size of it, it's only reasonable for us to have some, it's not that we don't trust staff, but I think it's only reasonable for us to have staff bring a recommendation forward, and hopefully it captures the hopes, dreams, and aspirations of this council. If there's a need to make some adjustments, then we can have that discussion in open at the council Horseshoe. And then that becomes part of, in a very transparent way, how the site will be evaluated. I agree with Mr. Chapman. We can't lose sight of the fact that this is a significant income source for EDIF 2.0, which council has wholeheartedly embraced. But I guess. Mr. Bloom, you no doubt had access to the reports and stuff from last time, and I'm just wondering, how come we didn't include some of that in this recommendation? And and granted, we can make that amendment now, and Councillor Ioannidis indicated he's willing to include it in his motion.
So through the chair again, I think one, based on the recent council approval of the process. But certainly, I think we very much agree that this is a significant site. There needs to be significant rigor and key points for council to consider. And if the evaluation criteria is one that you want to be us to bring a recommendation forward, I can certainly see the merit in that. I'm not trying to argue against it. I can see the merit in it. We just, in this case, follow the process that council had recently approved.
Okay, and then the last question I have is, obviously the University of Waterloo has been a key partner with us. Their lands are right adjoining this property, and they will still have some development potential. Might we consider working with them to see if they want that same master developer, considering the remainder of their land holdings potentially?
Through the chair, it's certainly a conversation we can have. I think we, in discussions that we've had with their staff, I think there is a collective desire to make sure that what they do on their lands and what we would ultimately do on the Bromyards is consistent, and there's sort of a joint vision, for lack of a better word. So I think to engage in that conversation, at least as a starting point, is something we're prepared to do.
Yeah, I think looking at that complementarity would have some value. At the end of the day, it doesn't mean that it needs to be a foregone conclusion, but it would certainly, in my view, make some sense. And I'll have a comment at the appropriate time.
Certainly, I'll come back to you. Question, Councillor Stretch.
Thank you. My question is around the idea of we're talking about building wet labs, very particular things needed in a new build. So, when we're putting it out and looking for a master developer or something like that, or a team to have a master plan or vision for how this works, is it possible then to have that client work with industry to be able to build something that is really functional for what's available, instead of just putting up, sort of generalities? Some of this is going to need very particular buildings.
Mr. Bennett.
Through the chair, you're correct. These are very specialized buildings, and they're going to be mixing, research and development. There'll be fluids that they'll have to be vented throughout the process. So that's something that we would incorporate in the RFP, and we would be much more prescriptive and specific about what we would be looking to have built out in those facilities.
I guess my question is around, is industry so interested that we can work alongside them with the developer to make sure we are building something?
Certainly, we will be consulting with industry around this and with the developer. We want to ensure that what is going to be built will meet the needs of the development community, as well as the needs of industry and scaling companies, so we can retain them within the region.
That's great. I can imagine some of the particulars are going to be very, very important, and so having a good idea of who's going to be using that space before the build will be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you again. Would you consider bringing back the clause about community space into the report? Like, I'm talking about the clause under development principle number 3, where we remove the include community space to be retained by the city.
So through the chair, you may need to clarify what you mean by bring back, but if the sense I'm getting is that council will want to review the RFP criteria, certainly all of these elements that included would be one where we would draft how we would be evaluating that, so there would be an opportunity for council to weigh in on the evaluation component of it.
Okay, thank you. The other question I had was regarding the geothermal district energy plant. So, we recognize that there is contamination in the land, right? And I've had an exchange with Rod Regier about, when we get planning applications, it always says geothermal prohibited. So I wanted more information on that. And what he said to me was, and this is a quote, "All groundwater in the region is considered potable. The region does not support the installation of any type of geothermal system on contaminated sites." So is geothermal actually an option here?
Mr. Reedman.
Through the chair, so we've been working with the region on early stages of a district energy system around the Brom yards. Mm-hmm. And so the difference here is that we would be working with them on the installation of the wells. They would be likely under municipal control. And so there would be monitoring and different installation practices that can be guaranteed to better protect the aquifer. So that's different than a private well field that's installed through a private development.
Okay. I'm only quoting what he said. So it's something to think about, I guess. The other question I had is, what are your expectations around affordable housing? So we have inclusionary zoning, and I know that was mentioned in the report, but is that, which is 80% of market value, so is that the extent of our expectations on this site?
So through the chair, how I would imagine this process rolling out is based on the vision and principles. Clearly in the RFP, there will be some mandatory requirement for affordable housing. When we get into scoring, those that provide more affordable housing get higher scores and thus push themselves above those that do not, as one of the multiple criteria. So I think the path for achieving more affordable housing is making sure that that is a scored criteria.
Okay. So yeah, I'll have some comments as well. Thank you.
Oh, Mayor Verbenich, your comment, correct? Okay. Councillor Hernandez, your comment? Okay. Just the only question I had was, given the, again, likelihood there is some contamination, and it was said in the report that the developer would be able to apply for the brownfield program, which I love. Is there any method, because you own the property, to provide assurances that they would qualify, or is there any that we can pre-apply, like to make sure that they would be able to, that basically that isn't a concern to any potential developers as they're looking at the property? Again, this is obviously once the due diligence of what actually is happening with the environmental. Mr. Bennett.
Through the chair, as part of our risk assessment on the site that's going forward, we would make a determination whether or not they would qualify for both the city brownfield program as well as the region's brownfield program. So anyone that is making a proposal on the site would have the confidence that going forward, if they follow through with the details of the program, that they would in fact qualify for the program.
Okay, that's excellent. Thank you. Mr. Chapman?
Through Mr. Chair, I just want to circle back to the question that Councillor Chapman asked about affordable housing. Again, I would just encourage Council to separate out public investments that you will make in this project from the market proceeds for sale of land. We need to have a plan to generate $80 million of land sales. This is our primary opportunity. In parallel, Council said that you will allocate $15 million from MEDIF 2.0 to support affordable housing. And so Council can make a decision to generate significant sale proceeds from this project and allocate up to $15 million of that towards affordable housing. But I would encourage you not to net these things so that you maximize the land sales and make a conscious decision about whether that investment is in this property or elsewhere in the city, but do it in the context of the allocations that you've approved in MEDIF 2.0.
Thank you. And Councillor Chapman, you wanted to queue into responders to comment?
No, I want to make some comments.
Okay, sorry. Actually, who would mind if you can just click back in, then I'll put you back in the queue. Okay, so no further questions. We are now in comment. Mayor Verbenich.
Thanks very much, and thanks again to staff and the consultant for the work that's been done on this. Councillor Hernandez indicated he's willing to make to support the amendment to have staff come back, but I actually would maybe ask that the amendment simply be that that actually staff come back on the 24th with some suggestions as to how to best word that work around the RFP process, so we're not wordsmithing that today. I think that might be most effective, but simply give that sort of indication in terms of what's happening today. And in general, though, I think this is a very critical piece of land for the future of employment lands in our city. It's not the only piece that's left along the railway corridor. In the fullness of time, I do expect that there will be other lands that will develop. I mean, that's just the nature of progress. And that will continue to support the broader growth of our innovation economy as it goes into the future. But you know, this is a piece of land that's critical to the overall innovation district that we're trying to create, and will tie very closely with the central station and the piece of land that the region has now acquired that goes from King and Victoria all the way to Weber and Victoria, which is significant. And that will no doubt create many opportunities both for employment, residential, and other uses. And I think, you know, as we look at what ultimately might come back in the future around evaluation criteria. I think a lot of these other pieces that we've identified around green space, around green provisions, around public art and so on are things that we're going to need to evaluate in conjunction with the ultimate value that will be offered for the land, because as has been noted, it's critical that we get the dollars that we're anticipating for our Economic Development Investment Fund. And lastly, I would encourage staff as part of that next scoping phase and testing the market phase, that we engage with the University of Waterloo to see if they're interested in being part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. And just for clarity, I'm not sure. So you're moving the amendment that staff bring back the proposed wording for returning with input on the rating criteria.
Right. And
for
that
the
come back on the 24th.
Okay. And Councillor Ennis, you're comfortable with that, or do you want to separate with and just include, just to make it simple? Okay. Just want to make sure we're crystal clear on that. Okay. Next up is Councillor Ennis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Davey. I kind of remember when this property was like a twinkle in our eyes around here on council way back, and it's quite extraordinary to finally see the vision of this that's been discussed among these halls and corridors and offices for many, many, many years. I can't, and I think Mr. Chapman, you said it straight. I think we've set a lot of priorities, but the priority of this site was to maximize the use so that for the innovation of district to be, for employment and everything else. But I'm not saying that we don't make an amazing district. Like, I think we can, I think with a clean slate, we can envision this site to be anything that we wish we could, that would be. And I know there's going to be many developers out there that would be interested in this site. You can easily make a lot of greenery in here. You can easily incorporate a lot of things. So I feel like it's we're an envy of many municipalities to have such a piece of property so close to the proximity to a transit hub, to our downtown, to our city hall, to everything. So I think this is a tremendous moment for us moving forward. I think this is a great investment by us I think this is something that our staff and our entire organization can be proud of. We're going to make a statement with this piece of property, and so I'm very, very excited, and I'm very pleased to see this, and I'm excited for the next steps.
Thank you. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you. And I do want to say that I want to thank staff for, bringing this forward. And to Jay in particular, I think I've sat through at least 3 of your community, I think 4. I was going to say 4, but I thought I counted 3. But anyway, thank you. And thank you for listening to the residents, right? I mean, it's certainly reflected in the final report. And as I said earlier, I do agree with my colleagues that this is probably one of the most important assets that the city has right now. And I think it's, I know there's still a lot of work to be done on this. I think that, one of my thoughts is it's not about who's living there now, or in the downtown area. It's about who's going to come into this area. And, you said 7,000. I think before even Victorian Park was passed, or around the time that it was, if you include Wellington to King to Victoria to Park, it was about 5,000 people at that point. So I think with this, we'll probably be well beyond the 7,000. So I think, I say that because, when we talk about community space and parkland, I think it really has to be considered in the long term, not in the short term. But as we know, we've got a deficit of parkland in wards 9 and 10 in particular, and this is city property, right? So I'm not saying turn it all into a park, But I think, you know, I would like, you know, clarity at some point of what we actually mean by that community space, because I think it's really important. So I did draft a motion. I don't think it contradicts what Mayor Vandenbeck is saying, but I think the reason I bringing this forward is I just think there is still a lot of work to be done, and things to be clarified. And why put an RFP at this early stage when we still haven't done the environmental assessment and we still don't have the results of a market assessment? So I'm saying let's go ahead with the other aspects of the report, but let's hold the RFP, the release of an RFP, until we have those assessments in hand. So that's my amendment.
Okay, I think it's only fair, since you're in comments, I think it is fair to ask staff what their thoughts or the implications are of this potential or proposed amendment. Mr. Bloom?
So through the chair, so the market assessment would definitely happen before an RFP goes live. I think that's how we've articulated it, so that element wouldn't need to necessarily be included. The environmental assessment, certainly I think we will be doing phase 1 and phase 2. Until we get those back, it's really hard to determine whether, we don't know what work might need to be done after that point. So but certainly phase 1 and phase 2 being done before the RFP would also be a given.
Okay, sorry, Councillor Chapman, you wanted to follow up?
Yeah, so then I guess what I'm proposing is that we take off that final clause, right? That procurement services and realty services be authorized to implement a competitive land disposition process based on et cetera, et cetera.
Mr. Chapman?
Through the chair, I think with Mayor Verbanevic's direction to staff, this issue will be clarified next week. And so we will more clearly outline what work will be done on market assessment, on environmental assessment, what the reporting back to council will be, and how that relates to the timing of the RFP. And that's the sequence as I understand it. So I think it will address your concern. And so I would suggest that, once you see that, you can then decide if that timing is misplaced and could propose an amendment at that point in time.
Okay, I'm okay with that.
Okay, so you're going to withdraw it and possibly bring it back at council. Okay, very good. So we're continuing with comments. Councillor Johnston.
Yes, thank you, Chair Davey. And mine is a request that when Mayor Verbanevic's motion comes forward, that we vote on it separately. The piece around the University of Waterloo and the main part of his amendment, please.
Very good.
Due to my employment.
Okay,
thank
on that
you.
piece, yes, thank you. So I think I am going to just, for simplicity, I think I'm going to break it up as a Mayor Verbanevic's amendment and Councillor Ioannidis' main motion, okay? With that specific portion as well. And sorry, you're still in comments. Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Chair Davey. I don't want to repeat everything that's been said already. I think this is a really special time. I think we on council and staff will look back on this as a very special time to create something really, really unique. I know we've talked a lot about community space, and I just want to say, I value parks, but an open space park is not the only place where people will meet and want to connect. I think this property is going to create a lot of opportunities for people to connect some different kinds of spaces. So I want to thank staff. I want to thank the rest of council here for the support on this. I think in my later years, when I'm sitting in the rocking chair at the nursing home, I'll be able to look back and say, yeah, I had a small part in that Bram Yards thing. So.
Or at the new Rockaway Senior Center, perhaps, yes. So just by way of comment, again, I think staff's done some really great work here. I'm excited to see what the future holds for this, and I'm really hopeful for the kind of response we get from the private sector. Just by way of I just want to be clear on that. Like, I think we're going the right route, looking for a master developer at the beginning. That may not work. And like to Mayor Benevich's point, that we can't really look at that as failure. It's us putting our best foot forward to see what we get here. We may have to ultimately, despite the grade conditions and that sort of thing, we may ultimately have to take a look at it in the future if we don't see the take-up that we're hoping for, and maybe break some of it up and implement it more piecemeal as per our vision. I do want to be clear, though, and thanking our CAO for mentioning it twice, actually, is that it's very, very important that we delineate what the purpose of these yards are versus our economic development strategy. Because the reality is we have allocated the funding in very progressive ways that's coming out of this land sale. So if we go in a different direction and we turn up the dial on adding a whole bunch more affordable housing, or we turn up the dial on adding a whole bunch more green space, all you're really doing is taking funding away from those other progressive items that we're putting out there. So we have to make sure that we're clear on what we're doing. We have a clear path on how we're going to dispose of this land in a way that respects the innovation district and helps our general economy. But again, the proceeds are going to go to all of those progressive items that we're talking about, including affordable housing and others. So I think it's really, really important that we keep that in mind. And when the staff does come back with the sort of list of criteria, that we hold ourselves back and stay disciplined and try not to throw everything but the kitchen sink into that, because if you add too many things in, you're just ultimately going to be reducing the proceeds that we get from that land sale. So I'll be speaking to that as it comes forward. But anyway, so what we're going to do, first we're going to vote on Mayor Verbenovich's amendment, basically that staff come back, everything but the interacting with the university, okay? So this is the conflict for Councillor Johnson. So, Councillor Stretch, I have you for comment? Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, I just had a comment. I'll make it quick. But it was just around the wording, around the master plan. I heard you use the word like a congregation or an area to congregate, but I think, hearing today and having sat in a few of those meetings, it's actually around more fellowship. It's not just, open space, but an interactive space that causes people to connect and relate. And then around the master plan idea, it being a holistic view, whether it's, one person heading that up, but I am really looking forward to having something really interesting and innovative, and maybe something really beautifully architecturally. So I think this is full of potential, and want to get those community pieces right for sure, but remain open to the possibility. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. So yes, again, so we're going to vote on Councillor Verbenovich's amendment, or sorry, Mayor Verbenovich's amendment for staff returning with the wording, so not including the engaging with the university. Those in favor? And that carries unanimously. And the part about the university, those in favor? That carries unanimously with the noted conflict. Certainly, Mayor Verbenich. I thought she did, but okay. Go. I thought you did, Councillor Johnson, but again, just to be safe. Go ahead.
Thank you. Pardon? Yes, I would like to formally declare a conflict with regards to any association with the University of Waterloo.
Very good. Oh, because
of my employment there. Thank you.
Very good. And I guess, do I have to do the main motion twice then too? Once including the university and once without the university? Looking at the clerks. Yes? Yeah, okay. So we're going to have to do the main motion twice as well. So first we'll do the main motion just with respect to the part about the university. Those in favor? And that carries. And the balance of the main motion, those in favor? And that carries unanimously with, just the main motion, so the main recommendation. So again, those in favor? And there you go. That's unanimous with the noted conflict. Very good. Meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everyone. I did do consent items, yeah.